fucking master!
What's next?
I'm all turned around.
Don't look at the state map.
This is my second day in a fucking car, man. Stop.
Please help!
Are we gonna help him?
No.
Stop!
This has gone too far. It has to stop.
Where is he?
We'll get through this.
I know.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Brickmasters podcast, a spoiler-filled recap for the hit HBO series The Last of Us, starring Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. I'm your host, Chris Lamberth, and with me on this endeavor is my wonderful co-host, media studies professor, Dr. Veronica Paredes. How are you, Veronica?
Chris, I've got a question for you.
You got a question for me. All right.
Yeah. Why did the mycelium fall in love with the soil?
I have no clue.
Because they had a deep connection.
Wow. Okay.
A very deep connection.
If I knew what's mycelium?
That's the underground network of mushroom communicators.
Wow, there you go.
That's their
All
filament.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I put some of these into chat GPT yesterday. I wanted some puns.
What's Chat GPT?
It's like an AI that's like a chat bot. It's like so you put in, hey, give me a pun joke about Chekhov's gun.
Okay.
So it was like, okay, why was Chekhov's gun always well prepared?
Why?
Because it was loaded with dramatic tension.
I get it. Yeah. That's funny.
Oh, there were some really bad ones though. It was just like objective fact. So that was the best mycelium one I got to. There was a lot of like, why did the mushroom go to the party? Because he was fungi to be with, and it just reworded that over different ways.
That's funny.
You like that one?
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
I got why did Black History Month cross the road?
Uh-oh. Oh shit. Why?
To get to the other side of equality.
Oh, good. All right. I didn't know where that was.
That was I was worried about that one too.
I was worried about that too.
Yeah. But it was okay. It's okay.
Cool.
But yeah, so anyway, got more. We'll thread them throughout.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to talk about episode 4. What did you think overall? Episode 4, Please Hold to My Hand, directed by Jeremy Webb and written by Craig Mazin. How'd you feel about this episode overall?
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was introducing these characters that aren't in the game, Kathleen and Perry. It did feel a little bit like, okay, we're setting things up. We're setting things up for future action. But I thought the dynamic between Joel and Ellie was really sweet in development. So yeah.
I agree. I really did like this episode, and like I was telling you before we hit record on this one of my favorite moments of the show so far are in this episode, and it was like a nice steady build to it, and it was really fun, really sweet. I really did enjoy it. I liked Kathleen. I liked her being in it. We'll talk about that. And it just made things more made things more grounded from the video game. The diversions that they made were like, oh, cool. Okay. I see what you're doing here. So I dug that.
Yeah.
Before we get into this, I did not say, we didn't talk about this last week, but rest in peace to actor Annie Wershing, who originated the role of Tess in the video game of The Last of Us. She passed away, had an untimely death due to cancer. She was also in 24, Star Trek Picard, Bosch, Runaways, so many roles that she wasn't necessarily a household name, but someone who popped up. And when she popped up, you were glad that she was in the thing that you were watching. It really, really sucks. But I wanted to shout her out because she's a part of entertaining me and one of my favorite pieces of media ever. So RIP to her. And I think that's the way you want to go out if you're any type of artist, that you made people feel better. And the better when you leave, the world's a better place because you were there. So RIP to Annie Wershing. All right, without further ado, let's break down this fucking show. Let's do this. One of the shortest episodes
Oh yeah,
of the
is it a
series.
shorter running time?
Yeah. If I
52 minutes. Oh wait, this is like extras.
yeah, they got it, because I was looking at the time as I didn't. If you can find that, let me know.
45 minutes.
Okay,
About.
yeah, 45 minutes. So episode
Or even
1,
less than that because you've got some intro in there. So about 42.
yeah, because episode 1 was really 2 episodes, and that's why they
Right.
only have 9. So they took some from, so it gets left on a cliffhanger. It's like we could have had a little more time, but I like the way they did it. I'm not mad at it at all. All right. So we open on Ellie in a bathroom, in a men's bathroom, playing with a gun in the mirror, the gun that she found at Bill and Frank's place. Everyone's saying this online is saying this is her Travis Bickle Taxi Driver moment. I wrote, my comment is that she looks fucking adorable doing it, playing with the gun. But we know this is all, like, I know this is all going to change. It's what a kid would do. Like, I think a kid with a gun would do. I don't think she's made that transition just yet with, like, I'm a monster. And we're going to see when she's put to the test how that happens. But that's my little commentary on it. She puts it in her bag, and she and Joel are at an abandoned gas station, and Joel is siphoning gas out of a car because the gas breaks down after a while. After like 20 plus years, it's pretty much water, so they have to stop a lot. And Joel's trying to explain what siphoning is, but he really can't. And she's like, "You don't understand, do you?" He's like, whatever. I know how to do it," or whatever. And so it's kind of dull. And then Ellie pulls out this joke book called No Pun Intended 2 by a comedian, Will Livingston. And it's just like the game. Joel is not amused. She rattles off a few jokes. Ellie says he'll be back. You can't escape Will Livingston. He'll be back. There's nothing you can do to stop him. And a fun fact, this is taken from the Last of Us wiki. I'll read you the little blurb I found. No Pun Intended Volume 2 is an artifact that can be found in The Last of Us and the DLC Left Behind. In The Last of Us, it's obtained in the chapter Lakeside Resort. It is one of Ellie's personal belongings and is already in her backpack at the start of the chapter. In Left Behind, Riley gives the book to Ellie in the chapter Fun and Games. So we'll see that probably later on in the series, but that's a little background on that joke book. What are your thoughts on this opening sequence?
Yeah, I would contrast that opening. I hadn't realized it was a men's restroom, but it's a restroom.
There's a urinal in there. I
okay.
just picked up on that when I was just looking at a recap. I was like, oh yeah, there's a urinal in there.
Right. The light and the way that she's lit, it's lit from the top, even if it's like this kind of dirty, filthy place of a public restroom.
Yeah.
There's the nature that's overgrown it. And you contrast that with the beginning of, is it episode 2, where she's waking up in this kind of fetal position, lit from the top. And so, I think that you're right in that there's still an innocence there, but the gun is introduced.
Right.
And when I saw that, I was just like, well, okay, a gun in the first act. We're going to see some kind of use of this gun. There's a promise being made to the viewer that Ellie's going to use this gun somehow.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think but there's also this thing that you're describing throughout that the creators are thinking about. How is she a child? How is she? What does it mean to be in this age? Be the age that Ellie is in this time,
Mhm.
which is so complicated, and you know, kind of learning things that kids shouldn't be having to learn.
Yeah. It's a fascinating thing, the way that, like, when Ashley Johnson did the role, she had to be in her 20s or 30s. I think she's probably a couple years younger than me. I just want to look this up because you just made me think of this. Ashley Johnson's 39. She was born in 83, so she's 3 years younger than me. Probably when she was doing the game, she's probably 28, 29. If they started for a long time. When the game came out, I was 33. She would have been 30. So she's probably in her late 20s when she was working on this. And for her to be able to capture that essence of a 14-year-old, that's one thing. That's fucking brilliant. And then obviously Bella Ramsey's 5 years past being 14. But it's still, I really appreciate this development of Ellie. The production team, Bella Ramsey, I really love this because I don't know, I can't, it's almost indescribable how I feel about it. It's great. She is a
Yeah.
kid. She is a kid. They're making it clear that she's a kid. Um, must so they're driving off and they're looking at this. You can see this landscape of all these cars that have been kind of pushed out of the way to make this path. Joel says must have been some truck. They used the big ass plows to put on them to clear the roads for their tanks and such. Ellie's like, "Oh, I want to see a tank." He says, "You will, tanks, choppers, all that stuff." But they used them to fight the wrong enemy. Like, so the governments, the soldiers use them to fight off people instead of the infected. So they use it to will their power on people. Ellie finds a tape, and it's a Hank Williams tape. This is our first and only needle drop in the show. It's Hank Williams's "Alone and Forsaken," which was recorded in between August and August 1948 and May 1949. It was released in 1955. And it's a great song. The way it's directly from the game. This whole sequence happens in the game. uh Ellie, she finds the tapes. Oh, does it make you feel nostalgic? Joel says that's before my time, but it's still a winner. It's a winner though. And they're driving along. Ellie pulls out this porn mag called Bearskin Magazine, which is a male porn magazine, and it's just like the game. I want your thoughts on this because this is something we referenced a couple of episodes back, maybe last week when we were talking
Yeah.
about someone wrote the fact that this Bill and Frank scene corrected the wrongs of the game, and they mentioned that sequence, and we get the sequence in live action form. So I don't know, like, what, maybe they were just reaching for that, and we still get that joke in there. You know what I mean? So
Right. And pretty closely hewing, like really close to what it is in the game, right? It's like the
yes,
script is the same.
yeah,
The joke, I didn't realize that, she says this thing about the pages being stuck together and
yeah,
then undercuts it by saying, "I'm messing with you," right?
mhm.
So she herself knows that she's playing naive in order to make Joel uncomfortable.
Right. She's totally fucking.
Um,
She said, I'm fucking with you." Yeah,
yeah. So it's a joke. But yeah, I think that that along with like the Will Livingston book and all the puns, it kind
mhm.
of feels motivated of like her really immature humor
Yeah,
that is like, and it's not the only lens that we're looking through, like, and I'm sure the game isn't that way either.
mhm.
But like having that kind of longer, deeper history with Bill and Frank, I don't know. I don't know if it so the issue is like the repair work that's allegedly happening, right? That you're describing.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I think it's just like, and that's just, she's 14. You know what I mean? Like she's gonna make those jokes. It is what it is. But
Yeah,
the intent was to make Joel uncomfortable.
right. And
Like
to
you
just say
said.
something stupid and really annoying and gross, and that's what
Mm.
she's doing throughout, right? It's
Yeah,
just going to be really gross and annoying. And
yeah,
she's kind of testing, like, can I be like this with you? How are you going to
right,
react to that? Yeah,
right. It's definitely a thing that um I noticed on my last playthrough of that. Like that is a it's called like what is the name of that trophy? It's a trophy just like if you listen to all of Ellie's jokes, you win an achievement trophy. And so when there's a dead moment, Ellie will pull out her joke book and start, cracking reading those jokes. And
yeah,
it's just like an endearing thing. It's like, it's fun. Um, so that song's playing. They're driving along. They pass some buffaloes. They pass an abandoned theme park, which means that they're relatively close to. They're close to the city to Kansas City. Um, this theme park called Worlds of Fun, which is a real theme park, and there's this dilapidated bridge. Uh, looks like there's like a bombed out bridge where train you can still see the train still on there. Might have been something where they were bombed. I don't know. um then it really just kind of shows the beauty of America, even though it's post-apocalyptic. Just how nature, it's a constant theme of how nature just continues on without us, and how small we really are as humans.
right.
um and then
Well, and
they
a lot of
oh,
people took issue with it because, sorry,
oh,
it's not America, right? It's not shot in the U.S. It's shot in
Alberta,
Calgary and in
right?
Alberta. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
fine.
yeah,
What
there's
do you do?
creative license. This is a
Yeah.
construction. It's a TV show, and they're doing that uh, to change the location from right the game, which was Pittsburgh, right to Kansas
Hmm.
City.
Yeah, because Pitt they wanted to progress the story and to make that trip quicker. Because yeah,
Yeah,
you're right in the game. You leave Lincoln, Mass, and you're in Pittsburgh. That's not that far away. It's like 7 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours away. Anyway, Joel decides to pull over, and they pull off into the woods and set up camp. You cut to them eating 20-year-old Chef Boyardee ravioli. Ellie's like chowing down. He's like, slow down. She says, no, this is slow. So she's grubbing out, and she's like, what is this anyway? She doesn't even know what she's eating, and she's just like grubbing down on it. And did you like Chef Boyardee when you were a kid?
yeah, it was good. I haven't had it since maybe the
Yeah.
age that Ellie is here. I don't remember the last time I ate it.
Yeah,
Do
I
you?
I wasn't the big. It was fine, but I was more of when I was Ellie's age. It was Stouffer's lasagna
Uh,
that I
yeah.
liked a lot. That was a big deal. Stouffer's lasagna. Um. Okay, so Ellie wants to start a fire, and Joel says no. He's basically, what did he say? He said something like, you know I'm going to tell you no." And she's like, what, infected? And he says, it's too remote. The infected can't reach out here, can't get here. Um, people, message, people are the
Hmm.
reason. Doesn't want hunters to find them. Ellie says, what are they going to do? Rob us? Joel says, they'll have way more in mind. They'll have way more in mind than that. Joel plans to drive all day and all night the next day to get to Wyoming. They're in their sleeping bags. And Ellie, yeah, okay. So Ellie asks another joke. Can I ask you a serious question? Why did the Scarecrow get an award? And Joel says because he was outstanding in his field. Ellie gets mad. She's like, "You dick," So he answers her back with that joke. He gives her the punchline. Ellie says, "These people you said, there's no way no one knows we're here, right? No one's gonna find us." And Joel says, no one's going to find us. Ellie says, okay. So after that, you see Joel get up and he's like basically standing guard, much like Bill would have done for Frank. You see Bill do that for Frank in last week's episode. So he's just kind of standing guard. And then we hear some of the score that's from the game. I guess what are your thoughts on this sequence, Veronica?
Do you mention, were you going to talk about the coffee next?
I was. Do you want to put that together, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's bring the coffee in if that's all
Okay,
right.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Ellie wakes up to the coffee pot going off. She smells it. She's like, "Oh, what the fuck is that?" Joel's like, "You don't like coffee?" She says, "It smells like bird shit." And then they start. You can see Ellie still in her. Someone mentioned this. Ellie was in her sleeping bag, and she goes over to the coffee, and she's still in her sleeping bag, like she's in her caterpillar phase of growing
That's
up or something.
interesting.
Yeah.
Quite literally in the cocoon or something.
Yeah. From her being like on episode 2, the fetal position, the butterfly, flying around her, flitting around her. So they start driving off. Ellie's looking at
Yeah.
the map. They start talking about the coffee and all that. Ellie's asking, where is her Joel's brother? He's in Wyoming. He's near Cody. He might be near a settlement. And she asks, why isn't he with you? And Joel says, long story. Ellie says, is it longer than 25 hours? Because we got time. And Joel, this is the most you kind of hear him talk at one time. He says, Tommy's what they used to call a joiner. He joined the Army when he was 18, right out of high school. He wanted to save the world, be a hero. He ended up getting sent to Desert Storm, being in the Army, but being in the Army didn't make him feel like much of a hero. 12 years later, the outbreak happened. He convinced Joel to get with this group that was making their way up to Boston. And he did it because it was mostly to keep an eye on Tommy and to keep him alive. It's where they met Tess, their whole crew, for what it was. It worked. And then Tommy met Marlene, and Marlene convinced him to join the Fireflies. And he basically says that's the same mistake he made when he was 18. Wants to save the world. It's a pipe dream. They're all delusional. Remember this monologue. Remember this scene when you get to the end of the show. After the finale, when we talk, remember that. Everybody remember this monologue. And basically he just says, last he heard, he quit the Fireflies too, and he's out there on his own, and he has to go get them. And Ellie says, if you don't think there's hope for the world, then why bother going on? I mean, you got to try, right? Joel says, you haven't seen the world, so you don't know. You have to keep going for family. That's about it. And Ellie says, I'm not family. No, you're cargo. And I made a promise to Tess, and she was like family. And Ellie asks, what if you don't find them? I will. I'm persistent. And he says, you woke up early. You might want to get some sleep. And Ellie's like, I don't need any sleep. Cut to Ellie being knocked out. So funny, just like the scene with Sarah in the first episode. Your thoughts on this chunk, Veronica?
Yeah, I think that I connect that right to this last one where they're falling asleep and there's like real joy in her him playing along. He's outstanding in his field, the scarecrow thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's starting to warm up. That trust is being built. I don't know if it's like trust or familiarity or learning what each other's quirks are and how their personalities. And then that coffee thing, just the way that she reacts and responds to it is pretty funny. Because I remember when I first started drinking black coffee, and I had to force myself to drink it because I was trying to be a cool kid and try to be more mature, and I wasn't going to put anything in it. It's always going to be black. And it tasted awful. It tasted terrible. And yet I would put like iced coffee when I was especially on a deadline in college, the paper or something. Try to drink it really fast, because it tasted really bad. So just their kind of interactions of like Joel slurping, just that kind of playfulness is like, this is kind of key, right? This is the
Yeah.
key development that's happening in this
Right.
episode. And then that, yeah, you're right. This car conversation is really significant. Yeah, I think I forget if it was in this episode or another place, but this kind of these conundrums, these kinds of ways of approaching the world, and it's like the way that you are before the apocalypse is also the way that you're going to be during or after, right?
Mhm.
So this kind of like diagnosis that Joel gives of Tommy, I don't know if it's fair, right? It's like his perception of Tommy.
Yeah.
Um, and it tells a lot about Joel even more than Tommy.
Right.
So yeah, I think that there's the mix. There's like, okay, well, we'll be playful and kind of jokey with one another, and then that'll also help us to plumb the depths of like our own kinds of philosophies on the world, you know?
He sort of has this, to me, like this hero complex where it's like
Definitely.
he's like, I gotta save him, and I will, because I'm
Right.
persistence. I don't know what he's doing. He needs me. We didn't really get this in the game. And sometimes when you're playing a game, you can kind of put all of your shit onto the main character. With
Mhm.
Joel as the protagonist, it's sort of like, especially in the video game, he's I go back to this constantly. He's a cowboy. And when he talks like that, that's really important. When a man of a few words, when he puts together words like that, he's kind of like, that means something. And
Yeah.
my dad was kind of like that. I don't want to romanticize him now that he's gone, but like when he would talk about stuff, like my dad wasn't very loquacious, put it that way. He didn't talk a lot, but he and I would have these conversations. But sometimes when he would give his assessment of something, of a person, he would really kind of break that person down.
Hmm.
Like, well, that guy's kind of like this. Do you want to be like that? Or, it was kind of, I liked it, but I still think,
Hmm.
as much as I like that, I think Joel's he's slightly misguided. He ain't
Yeah.
wrong. He's not wrong, but he's slightly misguided, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what happens with that kind of approach is that he may not be wrong, but he may not be right, right? Like
Yeah.
he's convinced of his rightness. That's what
Hmm.
that kind of disposition or approach kind of
Yeah.
assumes, right? Like this is
Hmm.
right. You want to be right or you want to be wrong.
Right.
And there's a lot more gray area than that. It's not quite as black and white.
It's definitely gray, and it's all this is, to me, this is like this is a very important scene. Like, the more that when I watched it last night, I was like, ooh, I was like, yeah, this is important, because it's gonna it's gonna tell us a lot about why he does what he does, if they don't diverge from the video game in this regard.
Right.
So, and then why I have such strong feelings about what he ends up what I feel like he's gonna do in this show. Um, okay, so they get to a point where they're blocked. They're driving on, and they get to a point where they're blocked in by this it's like this overpass, tunnel entrance, by this Sarah Lee bread truck, this big 18-wheeler, and there's a bunch of cars on the road that's blocking the overpass slash tunnel. Joel gets out of the truck to inspect that. He sees it, and the signs on the overpass show 35 south going into Wichita, 35 north going to Des Moines. Ellie asks where they are. They're in Kansas City, Missouri. Joel says, screw it. They drive around the tunnel area through downtown Kansas City, to get to the highway. And while they're doing that, they're in downtown. They pass a movie theater that's playing Underworld and Matchstick Men. One's a Sony property, one's
Mhm.
Warner Brothers property that would have been playing in September of 2003. I own Matchstick Men on DVD actually.
Is that
Um,
is Nick
Nicolas
Cage?
Cage
No. Yeah.
and Sam Rockwell. Um, do I have it in sight here?
Alison Lohman.
Allison Lohman.
This is Lohman. This is directed by Ridley Scott.
Good movie.
Yeah.
I don't see it on my
Black
shelf.
comedy film is what Wikipedia says.
Yeah, it's good. Have you seen it?
I don't think I did. I
Oh yeah,
missed
it
this
was
one.
good. That was around the time when I lived in Chicago and I had the hookup on this video store. That really tells you how old I. Well, I was 23 back then. I was in heaven.
Mhm.
Love that. Love that store. L.A. Tannin Video. All right. I did not go there for the tans. Okay, so Ellie's kind of like turned around by the map. She's having trouble with it. Joel tells her, "Don't look at the state map. Look at the inset, which gives you the city limits and the boundaries and everything in the city." Uh, Ellie says it's her second day in the car in a car. She thinks they're heading north. Ellie tells them to stop, and they look and they say, "Is that the QZ?" And they're like, "Where's Fedra?" And then they hear a guy yell, "Hey, please help." Joel tells Ellie to put her seatbelt on. Ellie asks, "Are we going to help him?" Joel says no. He accelerates uh, to run over the guy. Someone from above on a fire escape throws a cinder block, smashing the truck's windshield. Other people start shooting at the truck. They crash into a storefront. Ellie tells her, Joel tells Ellie, they're shooting. There's basically a standoff. They're shooting. Joel tells Ellie to squeeze through the little hole in the wall and go to the other side until he tells her to come out. He says, "They're not going to hit you. Stay low, stay quiet." Ellie does it. She crawls. Joel loads up his rifle, starts returning fire. On his first shot, he claps one guy on the first shot, kills him, kills another one. So that's two guys he's killed. Another guy busts through the door and fights with Joel and starts choking Joel out with his gun. You could see Ellie on the other side. The cut to Ellie on the other side. She draws her switchblade, crawls back on the other side to help Joel. She creeps up on old boy, and then she thinks she's gonna stab him, but she shoots him. It doesn't kill him. So the guy's like messed up. He's begging for his life. His name's Brian. He says his mother's close by. They can trade, but it's too late for that, Brian. Ellie can't finish the job, so Joel takes the gun away from her and tells her to go back behind the wall. She does, and then before the guy Brian's like, "Oh, you can take this knife. We can trade." He has this big ass like blade. So once Ellie leaves, Joel stabs him in the chest. And so okay, so yeah, we'll keep going. Joel has to get in on the other side, but he can't crawl through the wall. So Ellie says there's some stuff against the door, so Ellie moves it. Joel comes in, just like the game. They do that sometimes. Like if there's a space that Joel can't get into, Ellie will crawl. He'll either like push Ellie in, like, what do you call it? Like prop somebody up. You give him a boost to go on the other side of a room. She'll rummage around, pull out, something so he can get in, just like the game. Great fan service. Then they block the door back and make their way back outside. And then there's people calling out for Brian. They're like, "Body, this is Brian. Brian, they got Brian." They do that in The Last of Us Part 2. I think in the remake, they do that too. Like, they got Bill, they got Billy, whatever. Just to make it like more real. So what are your thoughts on this? And what do you think the ethnicity of Brian is?
How do you know? That's exactly what I was going to bring up, Chris. Brian is played by an actor named Juan Magana.
Okay, now we know who. Okay.
He's from, I think, Indio, California, the actor. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's another Chicano, or at least Latino from California.
At least
Um,
he booked that. I don't know if he lives in Calgary and booked that or if he booked that
oh yeah,
from LA.
probably not.
I think that my
Yeah.
manager did because I got on him. I was like, we got to try to get me at least an audition for season 2. And he said the
Well,
casting director does cast out of LA. So we'll see.
you just gotta come over here, Chris. Um,
Yeah, maybe.
so I don't know. It's this is an important scene.
Yeah,
And there's gonna be another scene that'll come up where Ellie and Joel process this a little bit in their own way.
right.
But this is a pivotal scene where Joel is trying to rely on Ellie in the car. I was surprised that they lost the car so quickly. I imagine there was more gameplay times or hours with that truck
No.
than we get. Oh, really?
No,
Okay. So you lose the truck pretty
this is a
quickly.
sequence pulled from the game. This
Yeah,
the part with Brian doesn't happen.
right.
It happens like there's supposed to be a hotel in Pittsburgh. I don't know how we want to get on that just yet, but like
Yeah,
Ellie pulling out the gun. Ellie in the game, Ellie doesn't have a gun until Joel is in a fight similar to the one he's in with Brian, and the guy loses his gun and he's about to get drowned in a puddle of water, and then Ellie picks up the gun and kills the guy, and that's the moment where it's like, oh shit, Ellie actually goes through with killing the guy. And this one, she doesn't because she can't. And so that's like that parallel from the beginning of the episode to where like, yeah, thinks she's a badass, but when it's time to really do the job, she can't do it. She's like impotent.
yeah. At the same time, she effectively disarms this threat on
Oh, she
Joel.
does. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that there's this, if you also compare it with how she wasn't able to, and she just didn't have the skills to be able to read a map and navigate.
Right.
And Joel was relying on her in a way that was like above her abilities
Hmm.
in the car. And then he underestimates, what she can do violent wise,
Yeah.
like within, being able to defend him. And so, it's a complicated one. And
Right.
the kind of moment, I think it makes a lot of dramatic sense for her not to kill him
Hmm.
and for her to just, I mean, she does injure him. It's not just like a shot in an arm or something that he doesn't continue the attack. It
Yeah. He can't
effectively
walk
stops the
anymore.
attack.
Right. He can't
Yeah. So
walk
she
anymore after that.
paralyzes him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if she hadn't, if she had just hit him in a way that that didn't incapacitate him, he could have run off and gone back to the crowd, and that would have been bad news for them.
Right.
So it's tricky, and then but she doesn't kill him all the way, and there's the kind of emotional processing of like, what does it mean that she doesn't, and
Mhm.
she sympathizes with him, and obviously he's like a sympathetic villain, which is like what they always are doing in this, right? In the show, it seems like
Yeah.
it's important that they uh, provide an empathetic um, portrait of the other side of the villain,
Right.
um, which may be like, yeah, this question that's going to come up throughout the show. Are heroes even heroes, or are they villains? Who's a hero? Who's a villain? Kind
Right.
of thing. So, I think having Brian cry out for his mother, I mean, God, I don't know. It's tough, right?
Yeah, not tough for me to process that because our heroes are Joel and Ellie, but I definitely what you just said is what Naughty Dog wanted to do with part 2. That was a thing because previously you had the Uncharted series where Nathan Drake was just mowing down all these brown people in these foreign countries with a machine
Right,
gun or whatever type of weapon he could get a hold to. And it's just this senseless violence that we're accustomed to in the video game world. But to make it more grounded, you have these people have a name, and it's not just like you shooting somebody. You killed Brian, you killed these other 2 guys. And it's like, what kind of reaction that you're gonna get, like somebody's gonna be like, Brian, and they're coming after you even harder,
right.
so it definitely makes adds to the intensity of these moments, and we'll come back to this in a bit. So we cut to a woman who we eventually find is Kathleen, who's played by Melanie Linsky, the great Melanie Linsky, interrogating someone in a cell named Edelstein. And we find out that he was alone when he was captured, and she's trying to find the whereabouts of these people, the Berquist, Mark Anthony Halpin, Carrie Schreiber, the Chans, Henry Burrell. And it's like a list of these people, I guess who she would deem to be as insurgents. She says to him, "You know where Henry is?" And then she reads a sign that's in the cell. It's a Fedra sign that reads, "Your rights while in detention. You are entitled to lawyer, medical attention, family visit, food, and clothing." And she looks around and she says, "I wonder if this is the cell where my brother was beaten." Edelstein says, you were wrong, and I'm sorry, but this has gone too far and has to stop. Kathleen says, "Oh, it has to stop now, you mean? Now that you're in the cell, but before people dying was okay, when you were safe and protected ratting on you when you were safe and protected and ratting on your neighbors to Fedra." And then she puts a gun to his head. Oh, what the fuck? Yeah, she puts a gun to his. Wait a minute. Oh, Edelstein says they put a gun to my head. It was like 12 at midnight when I was writing these notes. Kathleen, and then Kathleen puts a gun to his head, and she says, "There, have I satisfied the necessary conditions for you to talk?" And Edelstein's like, "For God's sake," he says, I delivered you and held you in my own hands." And he said, "I never told them anything about your brother." Kathleen says, "But Henry did. And we know that he's still in the city." And she thinks that he knows that too. And she holds a gun to him. She says, "You don't think I won't do it? You think I won't do it?" Edelstein says, "I'm your doctor." So we find out he's a doctor. And they're interrupted by a horn going off. And Kathleen comes outside. Her men bring her Brian's body and the other two people that Joel shot. You can see Brian was stabbed in the chest. And she asks, "Who did this?" Then we meet this guy named Perry, played by Jeffrey Pierce, who is the original Tommy from the video game. He voiced and mocap Tommy for both games. And he says there's some outsiders that aren't Fedra, but they're heavily supplied. They could be mercs. And then Kathleen says, if Henry has a radio, maybe he found someone out there. Maybe he called them in. And she asks, "Will he live?" Talking about Brian. And they're like, "I don't know." She says, "What if I have a doctor?" And then one of the guys says, "There's no chance." So Kathleen goes back into the cell and shoots Dr. Edelstein. And she comes back out and she says, "This is Henry's work. And he won't stop until we stop him. Find who did this. Find every collaborator and kill them all." Your thoughts on Kathleen, Veronica?
Yeah, further, like just the connection of like Brian being made an empathetic character. They do show his father kind of like mourning him. The bodies are brought out there. So it's again like, it's not just henchmen that are just disappear from a video game once they get killed. So similarly, like I think that now that we're thinking about it or looking at it, it seems kind of obvious that Kathleen is making quick ways to make this coherent for the followers to strategically work toward her aims, right? So she brings up Henry. It's obvious that she's got a vendetta that she wants to fulfill against this character, and she's going to use this opportunity, this tragedy, as an opportunity to rally the people to do what she wants them to do and to be behind her. She's a fascinating character. Even the quick thing about like this is the obstetrician, the doctor that delivers her. We don't have to see the journey of her getting to this point. It's just like really shorthand for like developing her out as sort of this person who's had a huge transformation into this ruthless person. The that we kind of don't get a peek to, but we already kind of like understand by the way that she's commanding authority and barking orders and, you know, able to command this group.
Right. And since you mentioned this, I'm going to read this Entertainment Weekly, an excerpt from this Entertainment Weekly article about Melanie Lynskey. I'll read this. When Mazin approached Lynskey to play Kathleen on The Last of Us, a character created specifically for the show with roots in the 2013 video game, she was eager to take on the role. Lynskey describes Kathleen as a reluctant war criminal. She's the sister of the former leader of a resistance movement in Kansas City, but it was only after her brother's death that she took over and toppled the military presence in the area. Imagine growing up as the sibling of Jesus and being like, my brother's the greatest human being. He's leading the world. He's the kindest, most decent person. I don't think that I'm that great of a person. I don't really need to be anything in particular because I have this person by my side, Lynskey explains. And then somebody brutally kills him, and it's so unfair. Who are you after that?
Yeah. It's great. Because the show is all about these pairings and these kinds of you know, gosh, these parallels or these kinds of what is the literary term? Foils, these foils, these pairs that are kind of like comparing. And so I was thinking, oh, it's Kathleen and Perry, but no, it's Kathleen and her brother. That's the pair. And you've got the absent figure in that. So, you know, she's always acting in relation to her relationship with her brother, you know, so her to her sibling, to her family. And in some ways that was Joel kind of acting in relation to Sarah. But now, you know, this kind of, yeah, who are you after those kinds of tragedies is a really interesting premise.
Yeah. And it's like, you don't really need to know that, but it's like dope that you do know it. Where it's like, that's like that when I was thinking about Todd Field and Kate Blanchett talking about Tar, where it's like they put in all this work to prepare for the movie, for the film and everything. But it's like, you don't have to know about it, but we did the work. So when you get what I know, people don't really give a shit about Tar. It's artsy fartsy, but I think it was one of the best things I saw.
Who doesn't care about Tar? Who?
People in general. Like it was boring. Most of my friends said it was boring.
No,
but it's like you put in all this work. You do the homework because it's the right thing to do for the role, and it's like, oh shit, we didn't have to know about that was your brother. I'm sure we'll probably find out the next episode, maybe, but it's like some of these things you'll never know. And it's just like, fuck. So that's all the motivation you need. My brother's dead. And now I could hide in his shadow. Now I have to stand to the forefront and I'm killing every motherfucker in the way. I tweeted this, folks. I think I called her Karen. I think Kathleen is a post-apocalyptic Karen going after these black boys that will find that they're black.
Right. And everything is their fault, right? Like,
everything's their fault. And it's like, it's almost like when we finally see Henry and Sam, it's just like, these are kids. Like in the game, fuck it. We're spoiling everything, but we'll get to that in a bit. Just remind me. Remind me when we get there. So then we cut to, so once she says that, like, let's get everybody, kind of reminds me of Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive a little bit too. Like, we're gonna get them. It's not as dramatic and not as like poetic as Tommy Lee Jones, but it's just like, then you cut to that military truck raiding their abandoned buildings, all her men, all her soldiers raiding the town. And then you cut to Joel and Ellie in an abandoned bar. And Ellie says, if they're not Fedra or Fireflies, then who are they? And Joel's like, people. Message. Are we going to be okay in here? Joel says, for a little bit, maybe. It looks like, they're checking out apartment buildings first, but then they'll be coming through these places soon enough. Ellie says, there's a really tall building like 4 blocks away. And Joel says as soon as they don't hear a truck, they moved as fast as they can towards it. And Ellie asks if Joel's okay. He says, I'm all right. Are you all right? And then he tells her he tells her he didn't hear that guy coming. She shouldn't have had to shoot him. And Ellie says, but you're glad I did, right? Joel says, you're just a kid. You should know what it means to. He kind of trails off. And he says, it's not like you killed him, but you shouldn't. And he says, I know what it's like first time you hurt someone like that. And then he says, I'm not really good at this. And Ellie says, you're not. And Joel tells her he's sorry. And Ellie like tears up. She starts to cry. This isn't in the game. So I wrote that in all caps with a bunch of exclamation points. Ellie says, it wasn't my first time. Then Joel gets up. He teaches her how to hold a gun. He said, she holds the gun. He says, who taught you? She says, Fedra school. He said, figures. And she starts to, so he shows her how to hold the gun and everything. And then I think it's a really sweet moment. Bonding over firearms. And she said, and so she starts to put it in his pocket. And Joel says, no, put it in your pack. You'll shoot your damn ass off. And as they get ready to leave, Joel says, we'll get through this. And Ellie says, I know. I thought, so this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier about trying to process what happened with Brian. Like, and it reminds me of this, and then I'll give it to you. The very, like this Holden Caulfield Catcher in the Rye thing where it's like, you're a kid, like, because of what happened to him. Yes, he's guarding himself and the walls are starting to come down and we see that, but it's like, he doesn't want to see anything happen to Ellie, because he knows what happened to his kid. And he just thinks kids that shouldn't have to experience that stuff. And you can see more when he, dumps the body of that kid at the beginning of the series, when we meet him 20 years after the apocalypse. Your thoughts on this, Veronica?
Yeah, it's an important scene for them. And it ends with a joke, or not with a joke, but like with like a really sincere smile and like happiness from Ellie, which is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of want to push back on that. Like, she could be kind of menacing when she does, like, when she was with that gun and stuff, like in that little scene. But it's almost like she's like, I kind of won him over. Like, this guy likes me. I think it's a little bit of them connecting, and it's a little bit of like, this guy trusts me too. And I got a gun. You know what I mean? And it's cool that I got this gun, but I just kind of want to push back on her being a savage, because she's not there yet.
No. It's I'm not saying that she is. I'm saying the circumstances, the all the stuff with the kid, with her as a kid, having to, like,
Oh, you're saying the circumstances are scary, not just like she's scary with the gun.
It would be the same thing, like, learning how to kick a soccer ball effectively. It's the same kind of thing, right? Like, oh, I have this power now. I know how to do this skill with my body.
Okay.
And it's that, like, the learning to ride a bike, being able to actually be able to ride the bike without being held or something, right? Without training wheels, or being pushed on a bike with, like, it's like him teaching her how to ride a bike,
right?
Kind of like fatherly, the parental thing, in absence of her having any kind of parental presence in her life. But I'm not saying that it's like, I think it is a bit of like, Sarah is dead. Sarah would have been dead in this kind of like world, because, and this is what they talk about, the showrunners, what Mason and Druckmann are thinking about, like, the kind of way that she is suited and kind of like is enjoying, or it wants to learn these things. but in a way, also the apocalyptic world. This is like something that comes up a lot in The Walking Dead, right?
Mhm.
Like a child, coming up in the post-apocalyptic world. What is that? What kinds of experiences? How is that skewed? But it's also an interesting scene. It ends there, but Joel like basically apologizes,
Yeah.
kind of like apologizes, which is a big deal. Like that's not something that every kind of adult will do with a child. He feels regretful and
Yeah.
remorseful that this child had to go through this. And he's like vulnerable enough to like, you know, I mean, it also plays into his complex of like the protector, and he should be able to have to take on all this burden of protecting them, and she shouldn't have to do any of it, or he should only be protecting her. Um,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
didn't hear that guy coming. It's my fault. It's my bad. Why didn't I hear him coming? So I don't know. It's like an interesting parental scene in
Yeah.
like the high parts of like teaching your kid how to ride a bike by like teaching them how to hold a gun properly, but then also apologizing for something that you felt they shouldn't have had to do or that you messed up as a parent.
That is deep because us talking about this, made me think a lot about my dad. And I don't know, I guess I see a lot of, I don't know, I was thinking about this like this just now, like my dad would do that. Like I'm in therapy, and
That's good, Chris.
I was talking about my dad, how he would admit when he was wrong. We could have an argument about something, and he'd say, or just have some kind of disagreement. He said, I probably shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Because if you're a parent and you're the authority, you don't have to apologize. Like
Right.
you don't have to admit that you're wrong when you have a child, like, and that was to me like that's a great quality. And for Joel to, when you have and it also makes me think of this, one of my favorite lines, hip hop lines. Common has this song called The Sixth Sense from this album called Like Water for Chocolate. And it would have been out during this world of The Last of Us because it came out in the year
2003.
in the year 2000. But he had this line. He said, I'm a complex man drawn off of simplicity. I believe that's on that record. And it's just like Joel is a complex guy, but he's a simple man. You know what I mean? And the way that he broke that down is like the kid shouldn't have to do that. It's like, man, I didn't hear that guy. I didn't hear him. And in the game, this moment happens. So you, like I was explaining in the hotel when the guy's about to drown Joel, Ellie picks up the gun and kills the guy. Once you get out of that sequence, Joel is like, you did save me, and here's a rifle. I need you to watch my back. So he gives Ellie a rifle, and she's like picking off these guys as they try to get at Joel so that they can progress. So that's the moment in the game where he trusts her, he takes the rifle back, and then he gives her a gun then. And that's the moment where things change, and this is where that relationship deepens. This is that shift to where all we got is us. You're not just cargo now. And that change happened in less than a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really powerful scene. It's really good the more I think about it. And it also gives me fond moments of the late great Aubrey Lambert. All right. Okay, so we cut to Kathleen, and Perry comes up, and she asks him any sign of anything. Perry says, "Yep," and they found something, and Perry leads her into a building with an attic. They climb up the attic, and there's drawings on the wall, like it looks like kids' drawings. There's empty cans on the floor, and it looks like they're probably out of food, so that's why they left. And then Kathleen says Henry wouldn't let Sam starve. So she says, double the guards around the provisions. They're close. She can feel it. And then Perry says one more thing. He takes her down into a basement area with this like cracked, damaged floor. It looks like a crater with something burrowing under the ground. It's a bloater, folks. You're going to meet it on Friday. And Kathleen's like, fuck. And the floor begins to rumble. Perry asks, what do we tell the others? Kathleen says, nothing. Let's just handle what we have to handle and deal with it after. And seal off the building for now. Perry says, yeah. So what do you think about this sequence?
Yeah, I mean, it's the heartlessness of, I mean, it's shows that Kathleen still has the same kind of scene with Edelstein, that like, you know, she sees the drawings, she's not completely untouched or unmoved by them, but she's still going to go try to, you know, she's still going to try to choose to pursue Henry over taking care of this more urgent problem potentially, which you could use as a distraction from like the riling the crowd up of pursuing Henry, to deal with this you know, cordyceps situation that's happening underground. So she chooses the attic instead of the basement,
Yeah.
which is, you know, there's a choice that she's making here. And it's a really quick scene, but it deepens that kind of characterization of her having a real anger for Henry.
Yeah. It's gonna bite her in the ass because we're gonna meet that bloater and the other infected next in 4 days as of this recording. So then we cut to Joel boosting Ellie into a building, just like the game. She goes through the opening and then rummages around a bit, opens the door, and Ellie opens it. She says, "What would you do without me?" Joel says, "By now, Wyoming." Ellie says, "Oh yeah, walked into that one." And they're in there. Joel says they're gonna work their way up in the building, and take a look at the city and find their way out. There's about 45 floors. And they climb up several flights of stairs. Ellie asks, "You know that guy who said he was hurt? How did you know? How did you know it was an ambush?" Joel says, "I've been on both sides. It was a long time ago. We did what we needed to survive." She says, "You and Tess and the people we were with, my brother too." And she asks, "Did you kill innocent people?" Joel says, "Come on." So they make it up to the 33rd floor. Joel is tired and sits down to take a break. Ellie says, "Get up, you lazy ass." And she helps him up. Joel says, "Lazy ass? I'm 56 years old, you little shit." Nice, funny moment. They break into this office, and you want me to just continue till we're done?
Sure, I was just going to say the knees are the first to go, I think, Chris. That's the
Yeah.
thing. The knees are the first to go.
And didn't
But yeah,
Tess mention that in episode 2? Like something
is
like
that
my
what you said?
knee.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
said something like, Ellie said, "It's not that bad." She said, "Yo, my knees, bitch." you know, trying to help your ass. And then so they make it they break into an office. Joel lays out some glass shards around the room in case someone comes into the room while they're asleep. And they're laying down, and then now we get Joel asking questions at night. When we were talking about hurting people, what do you mean it wasn't your first time? Ellie says, "I don't want to talk about it." He says, "You don't have to. I'm just saying it isn't fair. You're fair for your age having to deal with all of this." Holden Caulfield. So it gets easier when you're older. Not really, but still. The reason I asked whether you'd hear Ellie says, "The reason I asked whether you'd hear the glass is because I noticed you don't hear well on your right side. Is it because you were shot there?" Joel says, "Probably from shooting. So if you want to keep your hearing, stick to that knife." He still doesn't want her to shoot, even though she's got the gun. Then it's a little quiet. Then she asks Joel, she says, "Joel, did you know diarrhea is hereditary?" And Joel says, "What?" And Ellie says, "It runs in your genes." And Joel says, "Jesus." And then he's like, oh, Jesus. And she said, you laugh, motherfucker. Joel laughs and says, Jesus, I'm losing it. Great. My favorite moment of the show so far. Just like she breaks him in a good way, where it's like
Yeah.
they're connecting. And the way that she says, you laugh, motherfucker, she's like, I got you. I love that. So she, and he says, go to sleep. Ellie says, you go to sleep. And one of my other favorite things about this show is the editing, the way that they just jump to the scene. I don't know if I don't want to Dan Lebitard this, but I don't know if I've ever seen editing like this, where it's just like, it's so quick. I'm just like,
Mhm.
wow, I love how they do that. So then they cut to them being held at gunpoint by who we will later find is Henry and Sam. Henry's pointing a gun at Ellie. Ellie tells Joel to wake up. Joel wakes up, and he wakes up to Sam pointing a gun at him and telling him to be quiet, and blackout. Then we hear I don't know if you call a closing song a needle drop, but you hear a True Faith cover by Lottie Kessner. It was originally done by New Order in 1987, which means trouble since it's in the 80s.
Mm.
And I'll read you a little blurb. So, oh, okay. So like the original version is a dance jam. It's a fun song, but this is what the songwriter Bernard Sumner said in an interview with Q Magazine in 1999. True Faith is about drug dependency. I don't touch smack, but when I wrote that song, I tried to imagine what it's like to be a smackhead and nothing else matters to you except that day's hit. Um, and that's the end
Yeah.
of the episode. Originally, so we're gonna meet Henry and Sam on Friday. Originally, you're going through Pittsburgh in the game, and you're trying to escape just these random people, these hunters in Pittsburgh who are shooting at you because you're intruders, and you're trying to escape them from most of that part. The first quarter of the sequence in Pittsburgh, and they're shooting at you. Well, there's kind of like a tank. It's not really a tank, but it's a like a machine gun on top of it. I don't know. They're shooting at you. You make a way into a building, and then you get like knocked in the head by Henry, and you fight with Henry until you see Sam's holding a gun at Joel, and then they notice that oh, you got it. Henry notices that, oh, you got a kid with you too. You're not that bad. And then you find that Henry and Sam were originally from the Hartford QZ, and they left to go to Pittsburgh when the military abandoned their QZ. And then you have a journey with them. How'd you feel about this last sequence?
Yeah, I mean, it just reiterates this kind of thing that we've been talking around this whole time around children growing up in this kind of environment. We connect when we first see Sam, you see that he's drawn paint around his eyes to look like he has a mask, like a superhero, like the drawings that
Yeah.
Kathleen comes across in the attic that Perry points her to. So, he looks very young, right?
Yeah.
He looks like a very young kid. Henry also looks young, but we don't get much of a peek at Henry at this point yet until we just see that he's holding Ellie, has a gun over Ellie. But do you feel like you got to work on your delivery of the puns a little bit, Chris? Like I feel
Oh,
like
sorry.
I'm not sure how much you like them or respect the puns, but it's all in the delivery. Like the
I'm
very,
just being like I'm just reading it. I'm sorry. As a comedian, I should be a lot better with
you
that,
should
but
put some respect on Will Livingston's name,
yeah, the
Gotta
poet
be like,
laureate
yes,
Livingston.
got a very serious, question. Or did you know that diarrhea is hereditary? You got I mean, that's the way that Ellie does it, is the kind of that's the kind of bait and switch that she does. It's like pretty well done by Bella Ramsey. I
Yeah.
assume similarly by Ashley Johnson in the game. But I think that that was a very relatable kind of like, oh, we're gonna have a sleepover with Joel and Ellie in the
Mhm.
office, and then
I gotta
they wake up.
I gotta pull this picture. It's not in any of the games, but there's like a 3D model that's with the game where it's like Joel and Ellie at a campfire just laughing.
Mhm.
And that's what that made me think of. It made me think of that picture that's not in any of the games, but it is like I'll find it and show it to you. But it's just like this really beautiful moment.
I mean, I think I
And
did see it when I was looking at things for this episode. For some
yeah.
reason, I saw it somewhere else too. But yeah, it's like got this kind of truth or dare kind of vibe to it.
Hmm.
Even if it's not the actual campfire, it does have
Hmm.
that vibe that you're describing.
Yeah.
And then for that, like boom, to that kind of sense of play and play and hide and go seek and kind of like pretend kind of thing. Then all of a sudden you have Sam with a similar kind of pretend play with like, let's play like superheroes and hide out.
Yeah.
And but there's a real gun that's being pointed.
I don't know.
Um
Two things I want to ask you. Is it a reach that them being in an attic is evocative of Anne Frank?
uh,
Both the creators are Jewish. That's what
yeah.
somebody on YouTube said. And I was like, I guess. Okay. What do you think?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's you know, hiding out and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But we don't get that kind of um I don't know. It's not the story. It's not this story. That would be an
Right.
interesting story if it
Yeah.
was Henry and Sam's story. This
Right.
isn't Henry and Sam's story. It's Joel and Ellie's story. Um, but yeah, I do think that I don't if the attic was missing in the game, and this is something that is
Yeah.
it in the game?
No, no. They
Yeah.
they yeah, they just take Joel and Ellie to their hideout, but it's not really, it's just like an abandoned office building.
I mean, I don't think you have to go to Anne Frank, and it's just like imprisonment. There's like other stories of people being imprisoned in like, attics, and
Yeah.
attics are kind of like this thing of like hiding in plain sight or hiding in these kinds of spaces that
Yeah.
allow for the imprisoned to like be able to view things and see how things are going on in the world, even if they are having to hide who they are and in private.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, there is this way that they're being vilified, in the ways that Kathleen's group is drumming up support against them. If they
Right.
actually saw this child with a superhero mask drawn on his face, like would they still see Henry and Sam in the same way?
I think, well, see, this is when we talk about race and stuff. I was thinking because I did tweet that I got a couple of likes, but I think maybe it might be too blunt for a mainstream audience, or the tweet just wasn't funny. But like when I called her a post-apocalyptic Karen, and you think of the way that she talks about Henry, and then you see him only for a quick moment, he's a kid too.
Yeah.
And in the game, he's a young man. Like you could tell he's like maybe in his 20s. I had the pleasure of working with that gentleman in
Hmm.
a on a like a comic for a friend, doing some voice acting. Let me get his name. I want Brandon Scott voiced Henry in the video game, and Najee Jeter voiced Sam. Najee Jeter played Miles Morales in the Spider-Man game for PS4/5. But anyway,
Hmm.
he's more of a man. Like the character model for Henry in the game is like a young man, like maybe early 20s or so. And to look at this kid that plays Henry on the TV show, Lamar Johnson, he looks really young. You know what I mean? And very slight. And it's just like, and if I put on my like Dr. Umar Kufi, well, this kid's 28. He's 28 years old, so he just looks super
Yeah, I
young.
don't think he really. I mean, he's born in '94, yeah, and Bella
Yeah.
Ramsey is 2003.
Yeah. So
Um,
he's super young. He
I think
we
that, it's the same kind of dynamic that's being you know, between Joel and Ellie and Henry and Sam,
yes.
but
Oh, of
even more
course.
kind of amplified because Sam is so young.
Definitely.
Um, but the same kind of, it's just like a cartoon version
Yeah.
of it, you
It
know?
just looks young. Like it just like I'm thinking Kathleen's talking about them like they're talking about Henry like he's a super predator.
Right.
But he's just like this
Right.
young kid. And that's me being I'm reaching a lot, I think, but just when you think of the race, because we look
No.
at these things through a racial lens, it's like, there's a fucking kid.
Yeah.
That's how he, like, that dude, Johnson, plays like a young kid. You know what I mean? Like, that's how he looks on screen. Just like Bella Ramsey, who's grown, looks like a kid. And it's
Right.
just like, it does something to me. And now Sam is young as hell.
Well, he's
He,
literally a kid, it's
he's
the other
literally
thing.
a kid. Yeah.
I mean, he's 9, right? So
Right.
in the Last of Us game, Sam is 13, it says. And wait, yeah, and Woodward, the kid who plays Sam Cavion, is 9.
Yeah. And
So
this kid is actually from my hometown area.
oh, awesome.
He's uh, I don't want to jump ahead and try to spoil anything, but like yeah, I'll talk about it next week.
I
But
mean, I think
yeah.
that's what's obvious from this episode is that we're picking up that Sam is being protected by Henry. Henry's the protector of Sam.
Mhm.
Um, Kathleen knows that that's like leverage for them, that he's
Right.
vulnerable, that Henry is vulnerable through this child, through Sam. Um, I mean, I think that's obvious with like the drawings, the superhero drawings, and the way that she
Yeah.
talks about how Henry wouldn't let Sam starve. So, I think that she sees that as leverage. And I think there's more going on. Like, it's a little bit more complicated than like,
Yeah.
you know, Henry is a kid. He's literally protecting a child.
Right.
And you can see that there is the child within in the same kinds of ways that we see the relation between Joel and Ellie. Joel is like this grizzled 56-year-old white Texan, in the game and
Mhm.
potentially here too. A Texan that likes Hank Williams, whatever.
Right.
And he's like bonding and protecting a child, a teenager, but a teenage child. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about. Did you look at the new like the trailer for the next episode?
I didn't because
Oh,
it didn't play automatically, right? After the episode. I
I
watched the
look at it.
inside of the
I didn't
episode,
stream
but
on HBO Max until I watched it the second time. I just watched through my DVR. I think
mhm.
because it's a little easier to rewind and stuff. But it did play right after the episode after
So
the
what do we
close.
got? What's sort of revealed as, is it deepening in the
I think
Kansas
we're gonna.
City, Kathleen and
Yeah, I
Henry and
think we're gonna
Sam?
get more Kathleen Sam Henry backstory. I think it's gonna be a flashback, and I think we're gonna
Okay.
get up to where we are. Henry and Sam are supposedly in 3 episodes.
Oh.
So I'm because you're with in the game, you're with them for a stretch.
Hmm.
Um, and we're gonna see that bloater, and I think the bloater is gonna be a diversion for them. This is what I think. I don't know that this is gonna happen, but I think that bloater and those other infected are gonna be a diversion for Joel, Ellie, Sam, and Henry to get away.
I
I
see.
think that's going to be the end of that QZ,
Yeah.
that area. Um,
That's what she should have been worried about,
yeah, it's what she
Anyway,
should. Yeah.
And we get an early episode this week
Yeah, I'm
because
excited
of
about that. Yeah.
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So this Friday, like you mentioned already.
Yeah, because they don't want to compete with the Super Bowl, but yeah, and it's good that they did this because this is an all-black Super Bowl, and my eyes will be glued to the TV.
Yeah.
No matter how much they try to make it the Kelsey Brothers Bowl or the Andy Reid Bowl, it's fucking two black quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, going at it.
And in Black History Month, man.
In Black History Month, this is
It's a
probably
good
one of the greatest Black History Months of all time.
one. There we go. I'm trying to pull up some of my ChatGPT pun jokes. None of
Oh,
them
you
very
want to do some
good.
more puns before we wrap it up?
No, I don't actually. Well, why did the math book look so sad?
I don't know why.
Because it had too many problems.
Oh man.
Oh my God.
Okay.
These are all really terrible. I thought the mycelium one was good, but then I had to explain what a mycelium is. A joke's probably not good if you have to
If
explain
you
one of
have
the
to
terms of the
explain it.
joke, right? It's
Yeah.
from the joke writing advice that you might give me.
Yeah. I was doing a show on Friday night, and I think I talked about this on the Patreon, but I was doing a show Friday night. It was a late show, and it was like it was already a late show, and then after that show there was an open mic, and I didn't realize until I was on stage that there was an open mic. Open micers getting ready to go on. And I'm like, oh, I see you guys don't care about me. You just you think you're gonna get some TikTok clips for your set.
Right, right.
You don't care, you don't want to listen. When I was a open micer, you listen to the people's set. And I was like, oh, this is first team defense. And I had to do my jokes in front of people who are now famous, like Mark Normand, Sam Morrill, and some other really funny people in New York. And that was first team defense. So if those of you who listen to this that know who Mark Normand is, if comics don't really laugh, they'll say that's funny. But if you heard Mark Normand in the background say, "Ha," that means your joke was you had something. You might have something. So
Good. That's good.
yeah.
So
All right. Oh,
we did it. We did it.
Episode 4 of the show, episode 5 of this wonderful endeavor. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Once again, thank you to Veronica for your wonderful presence and your puns this week. Everybody, we really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you next time. Take it easy, everybody.